All right, hello guys. So here's my notes for the first actual 6 pages in that escape room. So for the first one, it's just asking you to identify the integers, but you got to keep, and I underlined or circled it here, you got to keep the numbers in order that they appear when you put them down here in the code. So what are integers? Well, integers are just your positive and negative counting numbers. Okay. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4 and negative 1, 2, 3, 4 are all integers. Fractions are not integers. Decimals are not integers. So looking at this list, the very first one that I see that's an integer is negative 9. So negative 9 should be the first number in the code. There's 2 more after that. So see if you could find them. When you put them in the code, there should be no spaces or no commas. Okay? You can pause the video if you want. I'm going on to the next page. All right. So on this page, a couple tips here. Anytime you're given an improper fraction and you're trying to see where it goes on a number line, turn that improper fraction into a mixed number. So I know that 21 over 5, when I do the division, you get 4 1/5. So is this where 4 1/5 would go? Well, we got to count the number of segments that are on that line. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments. So each segment then would be 1/5. There's 5 of them. So yeah, after 4 is 4 1/5, 4 2/5, 4 3/5, 4 4/5, and this would be 4 5/5. 5/5 would just be one more, so that would be 5. Okay? So I also did underneath that the decimal equivalents if I needed them. And you could find these decimal equivalents by just, dividing the fraction. 1 divided by 5, your calculator would tell you that's 0.2. Okay, and so on. But I just really needed the fraction forms for the first one. All right. So for the second one, it looks like they're in decimal. No, well, this is in fraction form. So I'm going to keep them in fraction form. If the number of segments between 0 and 1, there's actually 8 of these segments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So each segment would be 1/8. And I have that noted here: 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. This is where 6/8 would be. Now I got to see, is 6/8, is that equivalent to 3/4? Okay, you could determine that to figure it out, or you could just take both of these and divide them and see if you get the same decimal with your calculator. 6 divided by 8. See if that's the same thing as 3 divided by 4. All right. Again, you have to count the number of segments to figure out how long each of those segments is. And in this next one for C, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 segments, but it's going backwards because my larger number, -6, is here. So I make a larger negative number as I go from right to left here. Since there's 4 segments, if I just do it as a fraction, this would be 6 whole, -6. So the next one would be -6 1/4, -6 2/4, or -6 1/2, -6 3/4, and then -7. So right here, they mark that this is -6.25. Well, is that the same as -6 1/4? Again, you could take that 1/4 and just divide it, 1 divided by 4, with a calculator to see if it matches up. All right. And for D, it looks like it's -1 to 0. So that's only 2 segments. And then from 0 to 1, it's another 2 segments. So I bet if you figure out what's between 0 and 1 whole and figure out what this is, well, the opposite of that, is going to be over here on this side. So I think you could figure out if that's correct or not. And then for E, again, just turn that into a mixed number. And it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 segments here. So turn that into a mixed number and see if you could figure out if it's in the right spot or not. Okay? All right, next page. Closer to. All right, so I have some advice here at the top. It says just turn all the fractions into decimals by dividing with a calculator, then compare the decimals and make sure to add or annex zeros in any open spaces. So for the first one, yeah, which is closer to -5? And for me, it really comes down to two choices. I have them all listed in decimal form to the right. If we're looking for which thing's closer to 5 or -5, well, it's probably -4.75 because that's closer to -5, or maybe it's -5.9. I add the 0 after that, so that's really -5.90. I could subtract those choices from 5. So if I do, and I know everything's negative here, but if you just do 5 minus 4.75, that's only 0.25 away. But if you did the 590 minus the 5, then you get 90 hundredths away. Well, 25 hundredths is a lot closer than 90 hundredths. So that's my answer, 4 3/4. Okay. Again, turning them into decimals makes it a little bit easier for me to compare and see which one's closer to -5. All right. Let's see. Pretty much the same thing here for the rest of them. Yep. Turn them into decimals and then kind of compare and see which one's closest to 11. All right. Well, same thing for the last one. Let's go to the next page. True or false? Based on the number 23, again, you're going to write the letters of the true statements in alphabetical order to crack the code. So based on the number 23, is the opposite of 23, is the opposite -23? If it's correct, you put the letter down. Absolute value, is the absolute value negative, is the absolute value of 23 -23? Well, absolute value is always supposed to be positive, so probably not. 23, is that a rational number? I'll let you decide that. And then I broke down, they did a little bit of math here. 23 times 1/4 is 5.75. Is that true? Well, you could do it a couple ways. You could do it as a fraction, I'm showing you. Or just my favorite way is to turn them into decimals, use a calculator. 1/4 is 0.25, 1/4. So when I times 23 times 0.25, do I get 7 or 5.75? Again, you could find that out using order of operations to see if that expression is equal to 23. And for F, I gave you some notes. Again, you could divide them as fractions, turn 1.5 into a mixed number, 1.5. And then you got to turn that into an improper fraction, which is 3/2. So I got 23 divided by 3/2. Then you just keep change flip to divide by fractions. For if you want to do it just with the decimal version, you could just change the answer, 15 1/3, as a decimal. That's just 15.33. So see if that's what you get when you divide 23 divided by 1.5. Okay. Alrighty, and then I got the front and back of one more. The integer operation problems is just, reading the problem and determining, are they talking about a positive or negative change or a positive or negative number? In the first one, she had 174 in her bank account. So anything in your bank, that's positive. But when you write out a check, they're taking money out of your bank. That's a withdrawal. So that's a negative. So it'd be a negative $358. So that's what the problem would look like. It's a positive 174 minus 358 to determine how much is in the account now. And I did that one for you. So you see that answer there. All right. Just a couple of tips here for number 2. When you're withdrawing money out, that should be a negative 34. Again, the lake lost 540 feet of depth, so that means that's a negative 540 that's being represented. Depth is always negative. And you could read the rest of the question to figure out how much. Oh, I set it up for you. It says how much on average of feet were lost then each month. And there's 12 months in a year. So that's how I get that problem set up. And over here, this is where you got to find the total difference or the total distance between a positive number and a negative number. So remember, from the positive elevation of 135 down to 0, that's a range of 135, right? To go from 135 to 0, that distance is 135. Now add to that the distance from 0 to negative 25. That's 25 units from 0 to negative 25. Combine those two distances to get your total difference between the locations. And lastly, on the order of operations sheet, all I'm writing down here for you to help you and for you to use is just the PEMDAS order of operations. Tells you what to do. Make sure if you do see any exponents in parentheses, you could just go ahead and do those exponents first while they're in the parentheses, and then do the parentheses. Remember, multiplying and dividing, you do at the same time from left to right, as is adding and subtracting. You do those two at the same time from left to right. All right, you do it correctly. You should be able to crack the code. And that's all I'm going to give you for today. I'll send out my second half of help videos next week. If you still have any problems or issues, just go ahead and message me or comment underneath the assignments on Google Classroom. Take care. Hope you guys are doing well. Bye.